There is a version of you that wakes up each morning and immediately begins negotiating with the day. Before your feet touch the floor, your mind has already started calculating what might go wrong, what others might think, and whether you are truly capable of the life you quietly want. This is not weakness. This is the architecture most people have inherited without ever questioning it. Most people believe that motivation is something that arrives from the outside. A spark, a circumstance, a person who finally sees their worth. Stoic wisdom teaches something fundamentally different. It teaches that identity is not discovered. It is constructed, word by word, thought by thought, morning by morning. The language you use to speak to yourself before the world speaks to you determines the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you enter, and every version of yourself you allow to exist. What follows are 6 words. Not conventional affirmations. Not phrases repeated with hollow enthusiasm. These are philosophical anchors, drawn from the deepest understanding of human nature and the examined life. Each morning, they do not simply inspire you. They quietly reprogram who you believe yourself to be. Receive them with patience and stillness. Word 1. Responsibility. Most people carry their lives as though circumstances are the author, and they are merely the subject being written. Something difficult happens, and the mind reaches outward, toward blame, toward fate, toward the behavior of others. This is a deeply human tendency, not born from malice, but born from the unconscious desire to protect the self from the discomfort of true accountability. The psychological cost, however, is significant. Every time responsibility is placed outside the self, a portion of personal power is quietly surrendered along with it. The individual becomes smaller. The world becomes more overwhelming. Stoic philosophy reframes responsibility not as burden but as sovereignty. To be responsible is not to carry blame. It is to reclaim authorship over your response to whatever occurs. It is the most direct path from feeling acted upon to acting with deliberate intention. When you adopt this word as part of your morning identity, a quiet shift begins. You stop waiting for situations to improve on their own. You stop rehearsing grievances in your mind. You begin asking the more useful question, what is mine to address here? Each morning, place your hand on this word. Say it once. Mean it completely. Word 2. Presence. The unconscious default of the untrained mind is to live everywhere except where the body currently stands. People move through their mornings while mentally rehearsing conversations that have not yet happened, or replaying ones that ended long ago. This dispersal of attention feels normal because it is common. But common and healthy are not the same thing. The psychological cost of chronic mental absence is a life that passes without being genuinely inhabited. You arrive at the end of days, weeks, even years, with a vague sense of having missed something essential, and you have. Stoic thought holds that the present moment is the only territory in which a human being can actually act, choose, or grow. Everything else is either memory or imagination. When you begin your morning by claiming presence as an identity, you are not practicing a technique. You are declaring where you live. Behaviorally, this word changes the texture of ordinary moments. Conversations become fuller. Work becomes more deliberate. The restlessness that previously drove you from one distraction to the next begins to lose its grip. Each morning, breathe this word into the first quiet moment you have. Then remain there, even briefly. Word 3. Discipline. Most people have a complicated relationship with this word. They associate it with restriction, with deprivation, with a kind of self-imposed harshness that feels unsustainable. So they replace it with inspiration, with mood, with motivation, waiting for the right feeling before taking meaningful action. The psychological cost of this arrangement is a life governed by conditions rather than values. Progress becomes dependent on circumstances being favorable, and circumstances are rarely cooperative. Stoic understanding of discipline is not about force. It is about fidelity, staying faithful to your chosen direction, even when the emotional climate offers no encouragement. Discipline, in this light, is not the opposite of freedom. It is the architecture that makes real freedom possible. When you carry this word into your morning, you stop requiring permission from your feelings before you act. You begin to understand that the person who acts without needing to feel ready is the person who gradually becomes capable of more than they imagined. Small behavioral evidence of this shift appears quietly: the commitment honored despite resistance, the task begun without waiting for enthusiasm. Each morning, let this word remind you that fidelity to your own direction is its own form of self-respect. Word 4. Stillness. There is a collective belief, rarely examined, that busyness signals importance and that silence signals stagnation. People fill every available moment with noise, with input, with the consuming of other people's thoughts, because the alternative, sitting alone with their own mind, feels uncomfortable in ways they cannot easily name. The psychological cost of this avoidance is a self that never deepens. Without stillness, there is no integration of experience, no refinement of thought, no genuine understanding of what one actually values beneath the noise of what one has been told to want. Stoic wisdom regards stillness not as the absence of activity, but as the ground from which all meaningful activity emerges. A mind that has learned to be still is not passive. It is precise. It responds rather than reacts. When you begin your morning in even a brief encounter with stillness, you change the baseline from which your entire day operates. You stop adding to internal chaos before the day has even asked anything of you. You enter the world less reactive and more grounded. The decisions made from this space are different in quality from those made in the middle of noise. Each morning, protect a moment of stillness before reaching for anything external. Word 5. Enough. This word may be the most quietly radical of all 6. The mind that has not examined this concept moves through life in a state of perpetual incompleteness. It tells itself that satisfaction is located just beyond the next achievement, the next acquisition, the next version of itself that finally has more, knows more, or is seen as more by others. This internal restlessness is so normalized that most people mistake it for ambition. But there is a meaningful difference between the drive that comes from genuine purpose and the anxiety that comes from believing the present self is fundamentally insufficient. The Stoic understanding of enough is not complacency. It is clarity. It is the recognition that the present self, engaged sincerely with the present moment, is the only real foundation for genuine growth. When you begin your morning by holding this word, something subtle but significant shifts. The frantic quality of ambition softens into something more sustainable. You work not because you are incomplete, but because engagement itself has value. You stop performing for an audience in your imagination. Real-world behavior changes in this way. The work becomes less anxious, the relationships less transactional. Each morning, let this word quiet the voice that says you are not yet enough. Word 6. Endurance. Most people have been conditioned to seek the path of least resistance. Not because they are lazy, but because discomfort has been framed as a signal that something is wrong. When difficulty arrives, and it always arrives, the default response is to interpret it as evidence of inadequacy, of misalignment, of a life that has somehow gone off course. This interpretation is both common and corrosive. The psychological cost of misreading discomfort as failure is that people abandon the very processes that would have developed them at precisely the moment those processes were beginning to work. Stoic thought holds a different understanding of difficulty. Difficulty is not an interruption of growth. It is the mechanism of growth. Endurance is not suffering passively. It is the active, conscious decision to remain present and functional within discomfort, trusting the process rather than retreating from it. When you place this word at the beginning of your morning, You change your relationship to the inevitable friction of a full life. You stop being surprised by challenge. You stop treating resistance as a reason to reassess. You begin to move through difficulty with a kind of grounded steadiness. Each morning, say this word as a quiet act of preparation for everything the day intends to bring. 6 words: responsibility, presence, discipline, stillness, enough, endurance. These are not instructions for a perfect morning. They are the quiet foundation of a different kind of identity, one built not on external validation or favorable conditions, but on something more durable. The person who returns to these words consistently does not become more motivated. They become more stable. And stability, over time, produces what motivation alone never could: a self that remains coherent when circumstances do not cooperate. This is what the examined life offers. Not answers, not certainty, a steadier place from which to stand.